What would happen if everyone was treated equally and allowed to pursue their own happiness? I'm Dan Ringer, and we'll talk about fairness, equality, fear, and hate right now on The Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for The Law Works is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The Law Works is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia.
When the United States Constitution speaks of equality and the pursuit of happiness, to whom does it refer? My guests are attorney and West Virginia State Delegate Stephen G. Skinner and attorney Elliot G. Hicks. Elliot, Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to read something out of the Lincoln Journal, a newspaper in the southern part of West Virginia, Lincoln County, obviously. This is a summary of an article or an opinion piece that was published in the paper. It's the newspaper's summary. One of their readers said, "We were really glad to hear that school board is getting rid of them queers. The next thing is we need to get rid of all the niggers, spics, the kikes, and the whops. You know, even them Catholics, they are wrong as baby eaters. We need to clear them people out and have good, white, God-fearing Christians, and everyone else needs to be put to death for their abominations. We'll keep Lincoln County white and right. Thank you." That's a summary of what was published. It went on much longer than that. And it's disturbing. I don't know if this was a joke, as some suggest, or whether it was a sincere statement by one of their readers. I don't know if it's unique to Lincoln County or if it is pervasive throughout West Virginia. I find it really disquieting. Was this a joke, Stephen?
Well, I don't think it was a joke. I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that, in fact, this was someone's honest expression of their feelings. And this is just the rare instance where we get to see inside the mind of a few folks in West Virginia who not only believe in discrimination, but want to promote discrimination.
Well, this is not just merely a I dislike you because you're different from me. This is a statement where they actually say some of these people need to be put to death for their abominations. Elliot, you seen this sort of thing before?
Well, I've seen this statement, and I've seen the news reports surrounding that. I mean, this person is saying, I dislike everybody who's not like me. And I chose to take that as a provocation. I won't say joke because it certainly wasn't funny, but I chose to take it as provocation to try to get more comments simply because of the World War II era references they made. But nonetheless, it was something that if we have to ask the question, you know, maybe we know the answer. Maybe there are too many people that we believe do harbor those feelings, and that was simply an expression of it.
When you refer to World War II expressions, you're talking about the words they used to describe. We ought to look at it.
Kikes and wops and such.
Spics.
You know, it just doesn't sound like anything that we have seen since All in the Family, since Archie Bunker said those things in All in the Family, and it's not what you usually use. But that doesn't matter. It still was something that is not so foreign to things that we can hear. The sentiment was not so foreign to things that we can hear today that we don't know.
Well, you don't have to go back very many years before people were being hung, were being burned, being shot, being drugged behind cars by people using language exactly like this. Mm-hmm. Stephen, you're a member of the West Virginia legislature. Isn't there anything we can do about it?
Well, one of the things is that we need to do is recognize that there is discrimination, and that under our West Virginia Human Rights Act, we need to make sure those people who are categorically discriminated against are included. And the one glaring absence from that list right now are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender West Virginians. That is left out of the Human Rights Act. So under the state of West Virginia, it is perfectly legal to discriminate in employment and housing against gay people. It is a legitimate reason to deny someone a house, to evict someone, or to fire someone from their job simply because an employer or landlord perceives someone to be gay.
There's at least one case in West Virginia, it dates back several years, where a school teacher was fired from her job not because she was gay, but because people perceived her to be gay. And honestly, I read the case. I talked to people who were involved in it at the time. I don't know if she was gay or not. I don't think anybody knew if she was gay or not. But the rumor in the community was that she was, and the Board of Education fired her, and the firing was upheld.
Well, understand that the source of the news story in Lincoln County was because of an educator who was being fired, and she may or may not be gay, but that was certainly one of the reasons that was talked about for why she should be fired. We are reaching a period of time where there are people who are openly gay and lesbian, who are choosing not to hide, and they live an integrated life. And it is those folks who live an open and truthful life who are going to be the targets of discrimination. There are, as strange as it may seem, there are same-sex couples in every single county in West Virginia who live in the same household. They are our neighbors, they are brothers, sisters, cousins. They are absolutely everywhere. And as we all recognize that, in some ways, the progress that we have that allows people to be in West Virginia and happen to be gay and stay here also sort of puts a target on them, because they can be subject to discrimination if other folks happen to look behind the curtain and see, oh, well, that's a same-sex couple living in that household. So we have to recognize that everything is changing. And actually there are people who have been married in other states, same-sex couples, who live in West Virginia. And there's not a law that the West Virginia legislature can pass that will prevent that. So we have to recognize that people who are validly married in other states are living in West Virginia. And there have been gay people in West Virginia for 150 years.
As long as West Virginia has been West Virginia.
Precisely.
We're talking about fairness, equality, fear, and hate. My guests are attorney and West Virginia State Delegate Stephen G. Skinner and attorney Elliot G. Hicks. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. In preparing for this show, I tried to get a picture of what percentage of our population is LGBT. That's the abbreviation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered. And there doesn't seem to be any good agreement on that.
Well, I think I've seen there are some interesting ways of looking at the census data, and the Williams Institute at the University of Southern California has done some projections. And right now, I think the best projection I have seen about the number of LGBT West Virginians is right at about 56,000 people in the state. somewhere right around there. You know, when we look at various populations, we see some states have higher populations, some states have lower populations. District of Columbia has the highest number of gays per capita in the country, but that's, you know, it is a city, and the statistics are going to be very different. We tend to be a little bit on the low side, because we're mostly rural and we're not very metropolitan, not very urban.
The problem with that is, to be classified as LGBT, you have to self-report. And there's still a lot of people who are reluctant, if not fearful, of coming forward and saying to anybody, census taker or anyone else, I'm gay.
Of course, and that's why you have to project what these numbers are. We can tell by looking at the number of same-sex households. And that's one of the ways that we can figure out who happens to be gay. And we can see throughout the state who has a lower number of same-sex households, what county has the highest number of same-sex households, which, by the way, happens to be Jefferson County, West Virginia, has the highest number.
I was going to guess Monongalia County.
It's Mon is close, and then you also see Kanawha County has a large number, and some of the very rural counties have perhaps as little as 1 or 2, but the highest number would be there. And then you take that number and you make some certain other assumptions, and you move forward from there.
You referred to the Williams Institute. Their School of Law actually is the one who did the survey, and they estimated that nationally about 3.5% of the adult population identifies as LGBT.
Right.
And I think most people think it's a lot more than that. I have read some articles where they would say as much as 20 or 25%, which is apparently gross overestimation based on the studies that have been done.
Well, understand the key to what you just said is self-identified. People who say, I am gay or lesbian. There are plenty of people whose sexual orientation is that they are lesbian or gay or bisexual, but they will not identify that way. That's for a number of reasons. So the actual number could be, well, obviously to self-identify as being gay is to say, you have the right to discriminate against me, and for those folks who are homophobic and choose to direct their ire, I'm someone you should direct it to. So it's unlike race, for the most part, where we wear race on our skin, for the most part. Sexual orientation is something that is largely one can attempt to hide, for the most part.
This sounds so much like the 1950s, 60s, 40s, 30s, 20s.
And on and on and on in history. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes truly, truly violent crimes just because of something about you that makes me uncomfortable. I perceive that you're gay or not. Now, you may well be sitting at home thinking, well, I don't know any gay people. Yes, you do. The simple fact of the matter is you do. If, as the Williams Institute says, it's about 3.5% of the adult population, and fairly we suspect it's greater than that. That's a very conservative number. If you know 10 people, chances are at least one of them is gay or bisexual. Unfortunately, they may not even know that because it is so frowned upon by our society that you can't acknowledge it in yourself sometimes.
Well, one of the most powerful things I think that came out of the debate about gay people serving openly in the military was the argument about honesty, about the ability to be honest, and to be honest with your superiors, to be honest with those in the Corps with you, so that you could. If you're hiding something, I mean, we all know that if a person's hiding an affair, they're going to be less effective because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to be outed. If you're hiding anything, if you're hiding money problems, you serve with fear because you're afraid you'll be outed. And similarly, we had that in the military with people who were entrusted with each other's lives. The most powerful argument that was made in favor of allowing gays to serve openly is that they can now be honest with the people they serve with in life or death situations. And that's the argument that should prevail in our daily lives. Maybe some of the stakes aren't as high as they are when you're in a military situation. That's fine. But shouldn't we encourage people to be honest in their daily living?
Well, when I was in the military, I worked in a very sensitive area. I worked with nuclear weapons, and one of the documents that I had access to was the single integrated operations plan for intercontinental ballistic missiles. I knew when they were going to launch. I knew basically where they were going. I knew the sequencing of the launch. I knew the sequencing of the warheads arriving on target and various areas of those targets. And the thing that the Air Force was concerned about was not that I would try to sell this information. They had done their background checks. What they were most concerned about was that I had some secret in my background that would make me susceptible to being blackmailed to give that information up. And I worked in a unit of 500 men. They were all men. We didn't have, they have women in those jobs now too, but in those days it was just 500 men. And you know some of them were gay. You know they were hiding it. They were hiding it as deeply as they possibly could. And they had to, at least in some sense, be pretty unhappy people because of that.
And face punishment. And face punishment for being who they were.
Well, if you were gay, you were out.
Right, exactly, exactly.
One of the reasons why over 90% of the Fortune 500 companies have non-discrimination policies that include lesbians and gays is to make sure that those people who are working there get to focus on their job and not something else. So if someone who is gay is working at a big company, they're likely to have employment protections, and they don't need to worry about having a photo on their desk of their partner, okay? What we don't have are employment protections for public employees in West Virginia. We don't have protections for many of the businesses that operate in West Virginia that are more than 12 employees, up to 50. You don't find those kind of protections, and we certainly don't find it for landlords and in housing throughout the state of West Virginia. So we have this vicious circle of people who are gay because they're born that way. That's something that we should probably talk about. There's no choice about sexual orientation.
Well, I've always heard the phrase sexual preference.
Right. Well, you don't hear it as much anymore because the social science and science show us that sexual orientation is not something that people choose, and that sexual orientation is something that is a combination of genetics and biologics. And no one, I often ask folks to tell me when they chose to be straight. And
you asked me that question, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely.
And my answer was, well,
you don't know. So when we start with the premise that we haven't chosen our sexual orientation, that sexual orientation is largely immutable, we have to start thinking about how do we want these people to live in society. Do we want to have a society where everybody has the right to be happy, where everybody has the right to live their life the way they want to live it? And how do we build a society that says you can be with the person that you love and still have a job and not worry about it, and still be able to rent an apartment and not worry about it? That's what we're talking about.
We're talking about fairness, equality, fear, and hate. My guests are attorney and West Virginia State Delegate Stephen G. Skinner and attorney Elliot Hicks. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. There was a bill in the recent legislative session here in West Virginia that would have given some protections for sexual orientation under the Human Rights Act. It did not pass. What happened?
It did not pass, and it was not voted upon. And I don't think that had we gotten to the larger vote this year that it would have passed in the House of Delegates. It has passed the state Senate twice before. I was the lead sponsor of the bill. I asked that the bill be not run in committee because the bill was going to, if it proceeded any further, it was going to be watered down fairly significantly in two ways. One, I believe that transgender would have been removed from the bill, and 2, the religious exemptions that were in the bill that were focused just on sexual orientation. So religious exemptions just for sexual orientation, that was actually going to be expanded far beyond what it should have been expanded. We're not quite there in the House of Delegates. We're getting there, step by step.
We're going to see it again?
Oh, of course.
I'm surprised that passing a law that would say we're going to treat people fairly equally without regard to other things has trouble passing. I mean, I mentioned the United States Constitution says you have the right to the pursuit of happiness, and West Virginia says you don't.
Well, and we have to remember that even the U.S. Constitution was not necessarily written for everybody. And
Elliot, is that right?
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. Well, you know, that's an interesting point. I hear so many people who want to take a more conservative view of these kinds of laws ask why gay people are asking for special privileges. And I'm trying to find, what are the special privileges? What, the privilege to love the person they like openly, the person they love openly? You know, the privilege to have benefits go to their loved ones after they pass, the privilege to be allowed the same sharing of control over their medical decisions that everybody else gets.
Even
I mean, is that a special
present
privilege?
in the hospital room to hold
Right.
the hand
Sure.
of the person you're closest
Right.
to.
You know, I mean, these are important human rights. These are not special privileges. So, you know, where does this come from, this talk about special privileges? I was with somebody just the other day in the face of something that was on the wall about the gay men's chorus that was going to perform, and people, and the person asked, well, you know, why can't they just be quiet? I was like, well...
The gay men's chorus?
Well,
it wouldn't be much of a
very
chorus.
good chorus, exactly. But you know, people ought to be able to celebrate their own lives and celebrate their own successes, celebrate their own loves, and that's always interesting to me. Then when we talk about these things, these basic freedoms as being special privileges.
The special privilege of walking down the street holding the hand of the person that you are closest to.
Exactly.
That you love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's so much more to talk about in all this. I'd love to dissect the Boy Scouts, for example. Apparently they are going to put to their governing membership the idea that it's okay for the kids in the program to be gay, but not for the leaders to be gay.
Look at how much of the leadership of the Boy Scouts we get from the Eagle Scouts and people who have ascended to very high positions in scouting. I mean, what does that say then? That once the person has lived those principles for that long, that all of a sudden we cut them off from the organization? I'm not, you know, I'm sorry that they seem not to be willing to get there.
They seem to be afraid. Is being gay contagious? The teacher that was fired in Lincoln County, among other things, was accused of trying to turn her students gay. I wouldn't have any idea how to go about that. I mean, we can't even, in some cases, can't even turn them literate.
Right. The most important thing we do in the schools. Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things when we look at the situation with the Boy Scouts is we have to recognize that we are seeing an enormous shift in the U.S. And we're seeing cultural institutions, government institutions, religious institutions making an enormous amount of progress in a very short amount of time. And that for the Boy Scouts to make even a small incremental change is enormously significant. I think all of us recognize where we're heading, and probably within our lifetimes we're going to get through most of these issues. But right now, even the Boy Scouts making the change just for the kids who are in scouting is very significant, and they need to be applauded for being willing to make that move. Now, there are plenty of people on the left of me who will yell and scream and say, you haven't gone far enough, you haven't done that. But we do have to recognize the incremental changes, although sometimes it's kind of hard to do that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the good news is, Elliot, it took African Americans about 100 years before we could even talk openly about fairness.
Sure.
And with gays, it's happening much more quickly than that.
Yeah.
Stephen Skinner, Elliot Hicks, thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. I would suggest to you that you open your internet web browser and look for Google Gays in History. You will be surprised at the people we venerate who were in fact gay. Thank you for being with us. On behalf of the Law Works, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening.
If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The Law Works show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook. On the Law Works website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The Law Works programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the Law Works programs on YouTube and iTunes.
The Law Works is produced in cooperation with the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The Law Works is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. Additional support for the Law Works is provided by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.